Kevin Lynch. Kevin Lynch, for those architects here, this is not the Kevin Lynch that we made you read, or we were made to read. That nice little blue book. Who's read Image of the City? Yeah. All right, 3 of you. This is a good sign. There's not many architects in the audience tonight. So, Kevin Lynch, the Chicago Sun-Times has called Kevin Lynch one of Chicago's most gifting advertising creatives. Somebody was clapping there. I was pausing. Because he's in advertising, Kevin's been called a lot of other things as well. Why is that funny? Kevin's going to tell us, but I think he derailed the Olympics. Right? Yep. Let's go, Kevin. Let's derail Pecha.
All right. We can start. The first slide that I was going to use was going to be a woman with huge breasts, but Peter stole it. So we're going to have to go with the logo. It's hard to believe it was just a little bit over a year ago that Chicago was vying to be the host of the 2016 Summer Games. And if you looked around the city, during that time, during the summer, you'd have thought, wow, this is a city that's completely excited about the possibility of hosting. In fact, that wasn't really the case. The Chicago Tribune had a poll that said 47% were for the bid, 45% were against it. As is tradition in Chicago, we were split. And the only debate you really heard were people on the extremes, people who were blindingly optimistic, or those who just thought it would decimate the city. And you didn't really hear people like us, people in the middle who could have gone either way, who like having guests over but don't necessarily like doing the dishes afterwards. And so for us, we created an organization. We created an organization called Chicagoans for Rio. I call it an organization. It was a website. It was a one-page website, and that one page had facts and figures about hosting the Olympic Games. You had a slideshow of all the stadiums in Athens that they don't use anymore. Over down below, you could do a matching game to match the former Olympic host with the debt that they incurred while hosting. We also had a head-to-head comparison between Chicago and Rio, which emphasized. Can you shorten your laughter? You're just kidding. It was the content of the site was certainly a lot of fun, but it was really the reaction that was pretty stunning. We sent a link to 2 people on a Monday morning, and by 3 o'clock that afternoon, CNN was calling asking for an interview. Talk about your slow news days. They actually didn't quite know who they were trying to get a hold of, because at the last minute we decided to launch the site anonymously. Obviously, we spent a lot of time on our code name, and but we thought by launching anonymously, we could get even more attention to the site, and surely that seemed to be the case. The media really wanted to know who was behind it, who was funding it. So we told Crane Chicago Business that the only money we needed was for pizza and slow gin, and I know they knew we were kidding, but bless their hearts, they still printed it. They were sure that we were well funded, and they were also sure that we were actually from Brazil, and we were secretly sabotaging the Olympic bid. Phil Rogers at NBC sent an email and said, if you're really not in Brazil, if you're really in Chicago, watch the newscast tonight and tell me what color tie the news anchor is wearing. And I want you to remember that next time you hear the phrase investigative journalism. Well, it's one thing to suspect that we're from Brazil. It's another thing to actually confirm. And GamesBid.com, which is the authoritative review of Olympic bid business, confirmed in fact that we were Brazilians. Now, of course. nothing is true on the internet until a lot of people repeat it, and that story was repeated quite often. As was this: the Chicago Olympic Committee allegedly told Fox News, "Would you stop talking about the damn site?" And here's how that worked out. You can't really blame the Olympic Committee for wanting to shut the news about the site, because at this point the site was really becoming part of a more substantive debate on why Chicagoans weren't so crazy about wanting to host the Olympic Games. And it is true to the fashion of the Chicago Olympic Committee. They then just started to roll out even more glowing testimonials, such as the one from Atlanta Mayor Shirley Franklin, who said, "There's no downside to hosting the Olympics, no downside at all." I don't know what you remember about the Olympic Games in Atlanta. I remember a bomb going off. Maybe it's the Homeland Security in me talking, but I think a bomb is a downside. Well, listen, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news. Yeah, I know, we didn't get it. Yeah. There's always one who didn't hear yet. You know, we didn't get the bid. But just because that decision was made doesn't mean irresponsible journalism had to end. Shortly after the decision was announced, the Examiner said that the entire bid was brought down by this one-page website. I only mention this because our new project actually has 6 pages, not one. If I were you, I'd grab some canned goods and head for the hills. You don't really need to be Miss Cleo to know how this thing would have turned out. It really would have been fantastic. We would throw a hell of a party, no doubt. Indiana would have been knocking on our door asking to turn down the music. I think Wisconsin would have said fuck it and called the police. And Iowa would have been too polite to say anything. But it would have been amazing, but it really would have been expensive. It would have gone far above the budget. And do I know that for a fact? Yes, because I read it on gamesbid.com. And it would have been over budget, and it would have been late, because that's how we do things here. So the 2016 Summer Games actually would have taken place in late 2017. Maybe early 2018 at the latest, but they would have been great. It might have been a dispute over a labor dispute. It might have been traffic. Something would have delayed it. Here's the point. We live in a great city, and there is no reason why we should have to grovel and why we should have to beg and borrow someone else's stage to show off how wonderful this city is. What I would love to do is see this effort put towards creating something that's permanently and ownably Chicago's, and then we'll start Chicagoans for Chicago. As far as audiences go, you guys went okay. Thank you very much.
All right. I was in some pub up in Sauganash that night when they had the opening of the Olympics, and me and a mate of mine were watching when the guy was like running sort of sideways on a wall and was about to leap for like 50 feet and light the torch. Do you see that bit? And we were just wondering how was Mayor Daley gonna compete? And he was kind of sitting there in his anorak, and they kept flashing to him, and it was we imagined like flaming pork chops and a big tub of lard that would be lit on fire, and I don't know.